look at some terrifying video here from Atlanta. It shows a shootout at a gas station. You can see a man walking out of the store. Another man with a gun in his waistband is following him. Then the man goes to his car and pulls out an AK-style pistol. Moments later, both start firing shots at one another. You can see the bullets hitting the windshield. It's incredible. The suspect runs off as the driver continues firing at him. As the driver's trying to leave, a woman comes out holding her shoulder after she was shot. Her condition not known this morning, but police are still investigating, and so far, believe it or not, no one's been arrested.
And we're back. And we're not sure who the guy is on the bottom of the screen. We think it might be Keith Graves, but we're not 100% sure of that. A pretty remarkable resemblance, I must say.
He's handsome.
Good answer. All right. And our good friend Jeff Emde, our 007's in-house CIA agent. So today we're going to be talking being gas station ready, gas station SHTF, those sort of things. But before we do that, since Mike Sterling's not with us, I shall read the conflicted question. And it's a doozy today, by the way. Mike would be very proud of this one. So, weeks after the collapse of society, one man in your survivalist group accused another of murder. The accused denies everything. The scene where the murder supposedly took place is far away. You couldn't really verify the facts without risking someone's life. It comes down to one man's word against the other. If it were up to you to decide if the man is guilty or innocent, what questions would you ask and how would you make up your mind? That's a brutal question. I fully expect that Keith will have a great answer, though, because how many times have you been in a situation as law enforcement and had two people telling grossly different stories and you stuck in the middle trying to figure out who's telling you the truth?
Every day for 30 years.
Oh, shoot. Exactly. So, all right, I'm going to pull up a couple things here, a couple short videos just to show some examples of assaults happening at gas stations. So I'll play through them fairly quickly. First one is very self-explanatory. So you can see this guy sitting in his car. There's an argument ensuing with people around him. He gets sucker punched. Then he gets drug out of his car and pretty sure he's unconscious at this point. So one of these, fine citizens elected to kick him in the head, which is a typical MO for those types of people. This one here is pretty shocking. So as you can see, there's a guy running across the parking lot with a girl over his shoulder. This is the backstory to it. Won't show the whole video, but essentially a girl's trying to get back to her vehicle. She's being followed by a couple scumbags, and that guy in particular grabs a hold of her, throws her over his shoulder, and abducts her. And there's his accomplice standing at the gas pump as well. And third one is a convenience store at a gas station. Poor lady gets absolutely pummeled by four thugs, bad guys, whatever you want to refer to them as. So I think we've seen enough of that, and suffice it to say that, gas stations are considered a top 5 location to be accosted. And probably everybody in your circle has a story of some sort that revolves around something happening at gas stations. So Keith, since you're law enforcement for 3 decades, this routine better than anybody. Give us your thoughts on being gas station ready, what people should and should not do.
So first things first, what I noticed about the first video, it was in Modesto, and Modesto was close to by where I worked. And, if you're, a lot of times you don't have a choice if you're in a bad city. And I know everybody in Modesto is going to be like in the comments, like, it's not a bad city. It's a horrible city. So it is what it is, man. It's crime ridden.
Okay, so I take back my comments earlier. We got the real Keith Graves back.
sometimes you don't have a choice, right? So what I like to get, the first thing you do is keep your head on a swivel, right? Obviously, we know that, right? But as a good example is I got sent to a cop training class last year in Houston, Texas, and they put me up in Greenpoint. And if anybody is familiar with Houston, Texas, Greenpoint, the cops call it gunpoint.
Right.
It's not as bad as Oakland, but it's like a close second, right? And I know that because I'm there, that I'm a higher risk than other places of being
Okay.
robbed, shot, whatever, right? And I don't match the people that live there. So I
Okay.
look like an easy mark, right? So I make sure that I'm strapped the entire time.
Kind of like Bruce Willis, just different.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Just
And
saying.
sure enough, I went to this gas station. I had to fill up a couple of times while I was there. And the last time I was filling, the night before I was going to go back to the airport and return the vehicle, I'm filling up and I see three guys on bikes coming up, and I know exactly what's going to happen. So I stopped the gas, put it away. I backed up because I didn't have time to get in the car, and it's like it's going to happen here. And the first thing out of this kid's mouth when he walks up is he's like kind of tugging at his shirt but pulling up his waistband was, "Where are you from?" And if and where are you from is a pre-attack indicator. It's like a theme that a lot of thugs say before they're going to do something. And I realized that I'm about to get robbed. And so I just pulled out my handgun and I was like, "Not from here." And he goes, "Cool." And they all rode right away and they left because they realized like that's not the guy we want to screw with. I immediately put my gun away, jumped in the car, hit the red light. It was a red light. I ran the red light to get through it, and I was out. And I called Houston PD to like let them know, like, "Hey, just so you know, I had to draw down on these guys." And the call taker was laughing, and she's like, "Do you want to report?" And I'm like, "No, man, I don't care." And she's like, "Okay," like it's no big deal, right? The gas. I knew that I'm in Greenpoint in Houston. I know that I don't match the community, and I know that bad things can happen. I get gas somewhere else? Probably, and I should have gone somewhere else to get gas. But, I felt confident enough, which I can tell you if I had been in a shooting, I would have wished I didn't go to that gas station because I don't want to kill anybody, right? I
Right.
don't want to get in a
Yeah.
shooting. I don't want any of that to happen. I took a shortcut and I should not have put up myself in that position because I know more than anybody else not to do that, right?
This episode of SDN is brought to you by Switch It Up, your national grid down service provider. Get a quote on a solar PV system with battery backup at switchitupinc.com or click the link in the video description below.
Yeah, that's something that Tony BLAUER preaches on a frequent basis, especially as it relates to gas stations. That if you drive up to or by a gas station and that little voice in the back of your head goes off, your intuition says that looks a little shady. He said, just choose safety. Go to the next gas station that appears safe. And what's the worst case scenario? You lost 2 minutes of your life by choosing safety, but you didn't lose your life. And so it sounds so simple, but it's something that people routinely ignore. I've had people say to me that human beings are the only, creatures on the face of this planet that will ignore that warning sign, that sixth sense to say, "Hey, this is danger. Don't go there."
That was me. That was me telling you that. Yeah, I've used that on the show before. Yeah.
Right. And if you think about it, though, probably everybody has done that at one point in time or another where they haven't chosen safety over expediency.
Yep.
And thankfully lived to tell the tale. But, pretty crazy. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I want to cover because this is a topic that's kind of close to me. I've had a number of gas station incidents happen over the years, I should say. Jeff, give me your thoughts on, getting gas in areas that you don't know, because you've lived across the country, you've traveled across the country.
Yeah.
So you have to learn everything brand new every time that you were stationed somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things you kind of get a sense for, and we're a little different when we go into a new city. And if I'm when I'm the boss and I've got a new guy coming in, and I'll say, you need to spend 2 or 3 days just driving around the city to get a feel for it. We call it area familiarization. I said, you need to get your area
Okay.
fam. You need to figure out where the good neighborhoods are. You need to figure out where the bad neighborhoods are. When it comes to driving, you need to figure out the choke points, that kind of stuff. And I'll tell them, you have 3 days where you don't have to do any paperwork. I expect nothing from you except to burn gas, because you got to know your city. So gunpoint in Houston, if you're not from Houston or you're not familiar with it, you don't know that that's a bad part of town. In
Right.
Atlanta, the underground, not a good part of town most of the time, especially in the evenings. There are neighborhoods in every city which are, for a halfway smart person, no-go zones. You don't go there
Right.
unless you have to. Now, if you're a cop, obviously you have to. So the biggest thing is that, I always tell people, a problem avoided is a problem solved. If you
So
never put yourself in,
we do have no-go zones in law enforcement. I mean, there are cities that even the cops don't go into unless you have multiple units. And then when you get multiple units, then you go in because they're going to shoot at you, throw rocks and bottles and assault you.
yeah,
I'm not surprised, but I didn't know that that was an official thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The first time I ever encountered it was in Stockton, which is by
a giant
Modesto,
no-go zone.
and another absolute crap city. um, and we were chasing a car. I was doing a law enforcement class, and the car that we tried to stop took us on a chase. And we rolled up to this one part. This is called Conway Homes, if anybody's familiar with the area. And all of a sudden, the cop slams on his brakes, and the guy's taking off. I'm like, what are you doing? And I was a young cop. I mean, I think I only had like 3 or 4 years on. He's like, it's no-go zone. We're going to wait for units to get there. And then 4 units rolled up behind us, and then we went in force.
Interesting.
And once I got in there, then I realized, like, oh, this is bad. It was eye opener, but since then you talk to cops all over when we train them. They talk about their no-go zones. I mean, they're even talking about one, they might have one here in Boise, Idaho, where a bunch of Somalis have taken over an apartment complex, and they have to have multiple units before they go in there.
And that's
Chicago,
good to know.
You used to have the blue light cameras in Chicago. And we were up there for a training exercise. And cops said, go up in a tall building at night, and where you see a lot of blue lights, don't go there, because they put those up. That was when Cabrini Green was still around and all that. It goes, that tells you where the high crime areas are.
Yeah.
He says, so go for the dark one, no blue lights.
I'm hearing Jeff Foxworthy in the back of my head saying, and here's your clue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of thing. So you brought up an interesting point, Jeff, as far as scoping out a new area. Our friends over at Forward Observer, Mike Shelby and gang, they actually offer courses on doing local area studies, whether you're new or not new to an area. Very methodical approach to gathering this type of intel. We're not affiliated with Forward Observer. We don't get paid any commissions by them. Didn't even really think of mentioning them today until you mentioned that, Jeff. But for those people who are really interested, go on over to Forward Observer's website, check out their local area study. If memory serves me right, they have a free workshop that's kind of like an introductory thing. There's several sessions, and then one that you can pay for. Mike Sterling's gone through it, swears by it, said that he learned stuff about his community that he never knew before because of undergoing this kind of process. So I'm just going to pull up some of my notes here when I, hit on some of these things specific to gas stations. So we've already hit on a couple of them. I'd like to start, I guess, with the simple stuff, Colonel Jeff Cooper's, mindset conditions. And so for those people who aren't aware of this, he's a really famous guy. He came up with the concept of condition white. You're at home, you're in a safe spot. There's no need to be, have a high anxiety level for most people. Maybe if they're one of those no-go zones, maybe they always stay in condition yellow, which is the next level up. So maintaining, a higher level of awareness, but not to the point that you have anxiety and that you're scared. And then the third one for Colonel Cooper was condition red, meaning that the shit is fixing to hit the fan and, danger is imminent. sort of thing. And then years after that, somebody came along with an additional condition called condition black, which is what happens to most people when they get into this stuff, when they're, there's an active killer or something like that, and meaning that they just lock up, they completely freeze. And we're kind of back to Mike's thing of, human beings never rise to the occasion. They fall to their level of training. If they've had no training, then condition black is a thing. Keith and I spoke last night. I will tell you that I feel that there's another color code that needs to go in called condition gray. After watching the videos of the concert hall terrorist attack in Moscow over the weekend, I saw a whole bunch of people wandering around like zombies, many of them towards the shooters and not away from the shooters. So they weren't in condition black, like completely froze up, but they were certainly had a serious lack of awareness. So they piled up in restrooms, they piled up behind seating areas and knee walls, they piled up in offices. And I always think back to what happened at Pulse nightclub here in Orlando. I think this run and hide stuff is insanity. And, the bad guy there picked them all off like fish in a barrel sort of thing. So being aware of when you're at a gas station, you should always be at condition yellow, no matter what. And, I got some bullets I'm going to run through quickly, then I'll get you all to kind of weigh in on them. But these are the practices that I live by. And I've driven across the country multiple times, motorcycle, truck, car, otherwise. But picking a pump closer to the front door and visible from the front door, and avoiding pumps that are out on the fringes, number one. Number two, just because I'm that guy, but check for a card skimmer, grab the pump and pull on. If there's a skimmer, it'll likely come out when you grab it where the card gets inserted. And I've had some people argue with me over the following one because they've seen videos of somebody being accosted while pumping gas and pulling the pump out and spraying them. But as a general rule of thumb, my opinion is that you do not want to stand between your car and the pump. You're effectively trapped, especially if you have your driver's door open. There's one area for the bad guy to come in and there's nowhere for you to escape. So my preference is I set it on automatic and I walk away from the vehicle so I have a purview of everything that's going on. But not being trapped between your car and the pump's a deal. Locking your car doors. So there's a lot of scams out there. Keith's probably seen them where somebody distracts you, and while they're doing that, their accomplice is opening the passenger door and stealing something out of your car, maybe your pocketbook, something along those lines. Another thing, and our audience has heard me mention this many times, the last thing you want to do is stand in between your pump and the pump in your car with your weapon of mass distraction, because now it's clear to all of the bad people at that venue that you are not paying attention whatsoever. So, and the opposite of that, of course, is being aware of your surroundings, continuously scanning for bad guys, escape routes, whatever the case may be. I went through some interesting training on the weekend that I'll get to later. But I will say, when you're done pumping gas, you get back in your car, don't dilly-dally around. Just get in the habit of locking your door immediately. So I'll stop there before I go any deeper and give you guys a chance to add to the bullets I just raised. Keith?
Yeah. So when you talk about like being between your car, I mean, there's pros and cons, right? So pros, you have a little bit more cover there, right? You got, not 360 cover, but dang near close, right? But the other problem is I have been in a fight. When I was a brand new cop just off of training, one of our guys ended out tackling a suspect in between a car and the gas pumps. And when they fell to the ground, suspect started pulling the gun out of the officer's holster, trying to shoot the officer. And my options were very limited in that tight confined space. I wasn't really in a position to shoot the guy. And just that fight that happened in there, it was rough because normally, if it was on the other side of the vehicle, would have a little bit more extra space where, you can have a little bit more room to fight. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I think the biggest thing is just look around and see what's coming, right? If you are pumping and you're in between the vehicle and you're looking and as an example, you see those three guys coming up, like what I mentioned, and you're in a bad place, then you can get in your car and then lock the doors. And then if they continue passing by, you watch where they go, get out, disconnect, go. But if you've got to leave, can you leave with the gas pump still in your car? Yeah, absolutely. Hundreds of people drive away every day with the gas pump still in their in
Right.
their in their funnel, and they just leave. It's no big deal. It's replaceable, right? And you can, and if they stand in front of your car to block you, run them over. I mean, I mean, you have the ultimate vehicle, and if anybody's ever shot into a vehicle, the ballistics going into a vehicle suck. I mean, there's so much stuff in a vehicle, in a modern vehicle, with airbags and beams and wiring. There's so much to deflect rounds that, I mean, we shoot into vehicles all the time and they never do what we want them to do. So you have a tremendous amount of cover, and you've got a 2,000-pound vehicle that you can use as a weapon if you need to. But you brought up some great points, man. The biggest thing there is, if you don't have to go to the crappy side of town to get gas, then don't. And if you roll in and you're like, man, this is a bad place, then keep going. I never should have stopped at that gas station, but I did.
When you stopped there, was it nighttime or daytime?
Oh man, it was 1 a.m.
Yeah.
I was out having a good time with the Houston cops. God bless them. They're a bunch of good people. I was out like for my last night having a good time with them. And I was driving by the gas station, and I knew how to get up in a couple hours to go to the airport. And I was passing, I think it's a Chevron. Most people might be familiar with it. Chevron gas station right next to the freeway, going to the hotel down the street. And I was like, you know what? I can just do it right here. And it was empty when I got in there. And I was like, nope, I'm good. It's empty. And I did the 360 drive around. I'm good. And then these guys came out front, and I knew they were waiting. Like the minute I pumped up, it was right when I started it. I looked around again, and they were coming right out of the bushes. I'm like, like they were waiting. They knew it was coming. That's how I knew, right? It's like, here it comes. We're going to start this right here. And I'm like, I guess I'm not making my flight tomorrow.
Yeah. I think there's a good analogy of gas stations being like the watering hole in Africa. Yeah. That there's all kinds of predators hiding, waiting for their prey to come, because eventually everybody has to go to a gas station somewhere, right? But further to your point of them leaving you alone because, you pulled your pistol and therefore were clearly a hard target. I've only had a couple instances during the daytime where something along those lines has happened. Generally speaking, if you're a bigger guy, muscular, you carry yourself with confidence, those sort of things, these chicken shits will typically pick on the weak. And so I've had that advantage, my entire adult life. But on the flip side, I did what you said, Keith. I was in a rush. I stopped to get fuel in Daytona. We call Daytona Daytona. It's the most dangerous city, under 100,000 people in the country. The murders, insane number of murders. Like if you're in Daytona Beach and you pump into a search engine, murders near my location or near me, sort of thing, it'll pop up with a gazillion balloons when you're in Daytona. And if you go to Port Orange or Ormond Beach, north and south, barely any of those little markers pop up whatsoever. But anyway, I was in a rush, stopped at a gas station that I, under normal circumstances, would never do. It was the daytime. I had a 3/4 ton 4x4 Suburban. I was told by the dealer I was actually the only non-government agency that bought that vehicle that year in the entire state. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but everybody called me the FBI everywhere I went. The windows were so dark from the factory in the glass that when I moved back to Texas, DPS didn't want to give me an inspection sticker because it was so dark. And I was like, it's in the glass. What do you want me to do? I mean, it came from the factory this way. Long story short, I'm standing between the pump and the truck. Can't see through to the other side. Can't see my wife in the passenger seat. The next thing I hear my wife screaming. And I come around the back of the Suburban with my pistol drawn. And there's a guy reaching in trying to take her pocketbook, which was sitting in her lap. And she just so happened to have the window down. Obviously, when he saw me and I pointed a gun at him, he ran away. But realistically, I knew better than to stop in that part of town. But expediency.
Right? So I lived in my first house was in the ghetto of Stockton, and South Stockton off of 8th Street. And it's the only house I could afford. And it worked out well, got me to better homes like now. But the gas station was right by the freeway, and I would always stop at that gas station because it was get there, get on the freeway, go to work. And it was the ghetto gas station. And I was fueling up and I kept my head on a swivel. I am not like the other people around there. So I kept my head on a swivel. And sure enough, here comes down the street, coming up to the gas station, driving really slow. 4-door car, 4 deep with people, driving really slow. I know there's going to be a drive-by. Like, I just know it. And so I immediately positioned myself behind the engine block because that's where I've got more coverage. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to come here again. Right. And, but it's too late. Right. And when they come in, I realize they start reaching and look, man, I mean, I'm a cop. I know exactly what's going to happen. And I see everybody in the gas station starts freaking out because they all see it and it's too late, but I've been on it. I've been seeing it. And I immediately tell you how old school it was. I had a shoulder holster like Miami Vice style.
Right on.
I pull out my 6.226 and I get in a perfect shooting stance behind the engine block. And I'm just covering because it's like, if those bullets come near me, I'm going right back at you, mister. And they looked and I see the driver going like, stop, like said to stop, and they took off. Wow. And then this guy, he's obviously was probably going to be the target, jumps up, looks at me, and I'm still holding my gun. And I look at everybody like crap. I played my card, right? And I kind of gave a look of like, stay away from me. And the guy goes, thanks, officer. And he runs.
Right on.
It's obvious who I was, right? And I never went to that gas station ever again. What's the common thing between my 2 incidents? I went to a gas station I knew I shouldn't have gone to.
Yeah.
Even though that was my neighborhood gas station, right? I knew better.
Getting off a freeway, you have 2 gas stations and one's 2 cents a gallon cheaper than the other one. So that's where everyone, that's where I'll go. I'm going to save that 20 cents on that fill up. But if it's some sketch ghetto gas station and the other one is brightly lit, it's got cameras and, that's the one you want to go to. It's worth the extra 30 cents.
Yeah.
To not go to the one that looks like there's a serial killer hiding in the back, and go to the one that is, more of this brightly lit. There's people there with families, and because another thing criminals don't want are witnesses.
Yeah.
That's why they're hitting it at 1 a.m. But I think the main thing is if you don't look like a soft target, you step away from the car a little bit. And you look around actively, looking around. If you see a guy's little sketch, you look, go back, look again, so he knows you're looking. So he may go, well, okay, this guy's waiting for me.
In those neighborhoods, right? I don't think people realize that when we go to calls and you go with a lot of people, there is one officer is assigned to watch all the patrol cars. All right, so think about that. You got to have cops all went to a call. There's like 20 cops at a call, and one person is assigned to watch all the police cars. So that is your clue that you're in a bad neighborhood, that you have to watch even the police cars.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
and
Jeff,
it's only getting worse. Yeah. I mean, you should know, look, cops are quitting en masse. I mean, before we started, I was talking about a class I did yesterday. I can't do one class without somebody they're letting civilians into law enforcement classes, and I can't go one class without somebody complaining about how I talked about whatever, right? And the cops see this and they're done and they are leaving en masse. You're going to call 911 and your response times are going through the roof. And one of the officers brought up a great point to me yesterday. I was talking about departments that fudge their crime statistics. And that's something that's been going on for decades. I've been told to lie in crime statistics, which I refuse. Okay. But he brought up the point. He goes, we are only at 50% staffing, which means they're not investigating hardly anything. And he said, look, our crime stats they're proclaiming that this crime in the city is down. It's because there's nobody there to take a report. There's nobody there to take the report. The people know that there's no cops, so they don't call the police. And so but the politicians, mostly leftists, are going up there saying, hey, look at us, crime is down. No, it's not. This is how you tell the truth about what your crime stat looks like, is you look at stolen vehicles. Somebody will always report their vehicles being stolen because there's a license plate and there's a high likelihood it'll be reported. And also it's probably the most expensive thing they own and they need it back. Police departments, right? And police departments will take the report because they can merely just take the plate over the phone, get the data on the vehicle, input it into the computer and get it back. So stolen, like somebody breaks in your house. There are people that don't call because somebody broke in their house because they know the cops are going to call. They're going to call the cops and they're going to say like, we'll show up tomorrow. And literally the person's not doing an investigation because they don't have, he's got all these calls stacked up. It's absolute BS. It's not the way it should be, but defunding the police worked. They made it so miserable for us for so long. They're all quitting. And so when you look at like the gas station, your gas station may be safe now, but it's not going to be. And you better start like my gas station now. I'm in the safest area in Idaho, to be honest. And so when I go to the gas station, I mean, I still don't let my guard down, but I use it as an opportunity to practice my skills, of like, how do I, like my wife and I, the other thing to talk about with like these, keeping a head on a swivel in a gas station, if you're with your wife or another person, then stack up. Two people should be outside. One person should be scanning while the other person is doing the business. And they can give you a heads up when your head is down because you're putting the gas back or getting a receipt or doing whatever. But also it lets everybody else know that like we've got two eyes here. This is not the party to screw with. We work in tandem and we're going to dominate you and make you cry like a little girl.
So Cindy and I do that when we're interstating, especially when we're traveling to our property in the Blue Ridge Mountains. In addition to both of us being outside the vehicle, both of us are open carrying as well. And I know for a fact last year, the route that the GPS told us to take because of traffic in the Atlanta area turned into a complete dog's breakfast. So we got rerouted because of a couple accidents. We got rerouted because there were roads that were closed that Waze didn't have a record of. And next thing you know, we're on the south side of Atlanta. We're out of fuel and we're trying to get home back here to Florida. And so this gas station, there were people at the back of the gas station in the parking lot doing hand car washes. And we watched people come out of the woods, go to the hand car wash and buy their dime bag of drugs, and off they would go. So long story short is I'm outside, I'm open carrying, my wife's open carrying, and she looked at me and basically said, we got to get out of here like right now. Everybody stopped what they were doing and were locked onto the two of us. We had the advantage as far as having lots of rounds, but we had the disadvantage of being two people against dozens. Like there were probably 25 plus people mulling around outside this place.
So you bring up a good point too, like all these people, being at the disadvantage too, like you have two different options you need to think about when you're rolling around like that. Number one, you should have a truck gun. As long as you can keep it secured so nobody can steal it, right? So my truck gun is a Mark 18, Daniel Defense Mark 18. Wonderful gun, proven. I have great self-defense rounds with it. It's accessible to me if I need to get to it, but it's hard to steal, right?
Well, the good news with a Quad Royal Mark 18 is if you run out of bullets, you can beat somebody over the head with it.
Well, it's so funny. A lot of people say, "Hey, the '90s called. They want your Mark 18 back," and and it's funny. It's like, but what I remind people is that's the one I'm willing to give up to evidence when I cap somebody.
Right.
And people forget about that because murder evidence in California, much like the rest of America, murder evidence by law has to be held for 99 years. That means you're not going to,
right.
Your self-defense shooting is still classified as a murder. It's justifiable, but it's still a murder and it has to be held. Like, I'll give you an example. Like I have a hard time now carrying, my $4,500 staccato.
Exactly.
Because if I don't want to lose it, right? A Glock 19 I could replace pretty easy. I got another one coming to me right now to have a spare, right? So you have to think about those things, right? But of course, if you have to defend your life, you want the best thing possible. But I'm just not. I have a Knight's armament. I just don't want to give that up to evidence. Right. It's my SHTF rifle. But also the other thing you should have too is some less lethal options, right? And we've been doing testing that we're going to put up on Christian Warrior of less lethal options. And I'm telling you right now, the best option so far out of the testing we've done is the bear spray. We've been using it,
right?
And it's phenomenal, man. It puts out a huge. The volume is huge, so like you got crowds, you can dump out a lot. And one of the things that I've started thinking about is when I have to go to a large metro area. I'm worried about getting blocked with, we all know protests are coming, right? It's going to, in November, I mean, the country's just going to go to hell.
Yes.
What if I will avoid, I'll do everything I can to avoid going to a metro area. But if I have to, I'll have bear spray, but I'm going to have I have gas mask in the vehicle. And if I've got to do it, I can drive, I can do whatever with a gas mask, and not like a cheap gas mask. We're also doing gas mask testing. To be honest, I'm using an Avon, which is the same thing I was using on SWAT. I tried Mira. I tried all these different ones. By far, it's much better. I'll put that on, and I don't care if it comes back in the vehicle. I'm just going to hose everybody down because I'm not able to run them over. I may not be able to run them over. A lot of people are like very bravado, like I'm just going to run them over. No, man, you're going to have like 20 counts of homicide, right? Spray them, and it shows you're doing as much as you can to like prevent having to shoot somebody and run them over. If you do, side note, not to get too far into the weeds, if you do have to run somebody over, okay, it's better to say I was trying to flee and I accidentally hit them than to say I intentionally hit them. Okay. I'm not telling you to lie. I'm not telling you like how to get away with things. I'm just saying, like, looking at it objectively, if you run somebody over and it's an accident, it's an accident. It would be vehicular homicide at the worst, and you have insurance and all these other things, right? And then you also have this like, wow, he was getting surrounded, he was trying to leave. Like, what else? Versus, no, I saw that MFer and I ran him over because whatever. That's deadly force, not covered by insurance. Now that could be murder if you have a rogue DA, which is, if let's face it, where this is happening, it's going to be a George Soros backed DA in the area, and now they're going to hit you with a murder. Right. So, I mean, you got to think about, and biggest thing is keep your mouth shut. But
yeah, well, similar to the advice that if you're in the unfortunate situation of being in a citizen involved shooting and you call 911, you don't say, I shot somebody.
Yep.
Somebody's been shot. Please send, the cops and a ambulance sort of thing, and not go into any great detail there. I got all kinds of notes that I just jotted down while both you were speaking. So I'm going to go back in time to when Jeff was speaking, number one. And Jeff, you said something to the effect of looking at the bad guys, essentially maintaining eye contact with them. We took some training over the weekend at WOFT, WOFT.com, where our families train. And I won't go deep into it, but they went into an entire spiel on how in the animal kingdom, as long as eye contact is maintained, there's a much lower probability that the predator will jump the person, even to the point of not knowing things like when tigers take a drink, they flip their ears around 180 degrees and they all have markings that look like eyeballs. So somebody who's thinking of attacking the tiger may think that they're actually looking at them. So that was a good point. Keith, couple things you touched on, and a lot of it is due to this crap that happened in 2016, especially 2020, that you can't claim that the crime rate's going down just because the crimes aren't being reported or aren't being acted upon. And that's precisely what's happened. And it's by design. None of this is happening by fluke, as far as the reduction in staffing levels, the reduction in crimes being committed. And then you get these morons pontificating how they're responsible for this drop in crime. It's kind of like telling people that there's no inflation, but you're going to pay $7 for a stick of butter.
Well,
sort of
yeah, you see it in San Francisco. Retail theft is way down because it's no longer a crime to steal crap.
Well, and then everybody, there's not enough cops. All the cops are leaving San Francisco PD and going to area agencies. And then all the businesses are leaving on top of that. I mean, like, come on, man.
I was reading something just yesterday about Dallas, and that they don't have a big crime problem because they have their police force and their city government and their civic organizations have what they said probably the best group relationship they've ever seen in a city. And so you've got the community supporting the police are talking to the communities, the government is funding the police, they've got the money to pay their officers, and they don't have the problems that.
Oh, we lost Jeff.
He's frozen in time.
Yep. There you go. We lost you there. Oh, and he's back. We lost you for a second there, Jeff.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just saying that Dallas, they
No
have a
sound.
very good relationship between the police and the community and the city, and they don't have
Well,
the
I think
crime.
that matters. So it's interesting though that Keith got us on this path, because a couple days ago on Monday's edition of Survival Dispatch News Live, we specifically brought up Baltimore, where you have 3 cops looking after a district with 61,000 people in it.
You know, that's normal, right? Like that's normal across many cities in America. I mean, it's funny, but somebody posted that in I'm in a group of law enforcement social media administrators.
Okay.
And so it's basically all your favorite cop pages, not official ones, but like cop pages.
Gotcha.
We're all in there. And somebody posted that. And they're all over the country. Everybody started posting how many cops they have and how many people they were patrolling. And it was the same as Baltimore. And the kind of the premise the cops were on were like, stop complaining. That's where we've been at. Right. And then a couple of us are like, no, man, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Those of us that were older, that were when you were happy to say, like, what did you do for a living? Oh, I'm a cop. I was telling a guy today, sometimes I'm afraid to tell people that I was a cop, because it's become so like taboo. Like, oh, you're like almost like saying I'm a soldier during the Vietnam War. You know,
Yeah.
it just get hammered. But that what's happening in Baltimore, they're just publicizing it.
Yeah.
I mean, what you need to do, a lot of people are down on law enforcement unions, and I get it, because they've been on the wrong side of a lot of issues. But one of the things that you should listen to them for is like a good one is like the Border Patrol Union. And the Border Patrol Union has been slamming Biden hardcore, because the agents can't speak. They can't say anything, right? And you don't want them to, right?
No.
It should be the union. And like, as an example for my union, I can't speak up. I'm going to get in trouble. I mean, I started all my social media because I wanted to violate my department's social media policy and not get in trouble, right? Guys have to suffer in silence, and they're using the unions to speak up for them. So Baltimore, their union spoke up and said, hey, look at this. Good on them for saying that. But everywhere in America, like right now, the city I'm in a city of probably 35,000, and we have 2 cops on duty.
It's crazy.
So I did a video over Christian Warrior Training where I said you have to be your own police officer, and I explained this. And it's like, look, man, you better start training, and you better start having the weapons that you need, and start getting ready, because you're going to call 911 and forget that China's going to shut down our phones again, right? And you can't call 911 and nobody's going to come. But I am truly fearful for where law enforcement is headed, because so many good people are leaving and they're being replaced by illegal aliens.
Yes.
People that, Detroit PD just did a recruiting video where they said, we will help you clear up your warrants to get a job with us. I mean, I don't want anybody that's got warrants working in my city.
That's crazy. Backing up just for a second, Keith, simply because you were there, was it Prop 41 in California that raised the shoplifting thing to
Prop 47?
Prop 47. I knew it was 40 something.
Yep.
Yeah. So for those people who are not familiar with that was, a prop supposedly that basically said if you steal up to, is it $950, Keith?
Yep. It was $900. And then it also legalized drugs. So they said, so with that, they said it didn't legalize drugs. That what it did was made drugs a misdemeanor. Well, the problem is the district attorneys said, hey, you took all the power away from us, because part of that was like you get arrested for possession, you would have to go to drug rehab. Well, now you can't force them to drug rehab. So the district attorneys are like, we're not charging it. We don't care. And so overnight, DA stopped charging it. And the cops were like, well, why am I going to arrest the guy? Because I literally am going to stop a guy with fentanyl, give him a ticket, and then send him on his way for the DA not to do anything. So you had shoplifting. Shoplifting became legal, right? Because if it's under 900, the DA is not going to charge misdemeanor shoplifting. They don't do that. And then drug possession overnight. So you had all these druggies just thieving.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned it was just to highlight the accurate comment that you made that sure, crime seems to be falling when nobody's being charged.
Yep.
You know, if none of these crimes are being charged, yeah, it looks like crime's going down.
It's
Nothing
like
could be
saying
further from the truth.
the country's getting thinner because we stopped weighing fat people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it goes
It's
back to the
exactly
gas
the same.
station. It goes back to your gas station theory. I tell you what, man, you better be paying attention when you hit even a nice city's gas station, because
Yeah.
let's say somebody is going to victimize you and you dump them and you get into a shootout, you kill that guy, he's down, you call 911. You better be able to figure out what you're going to do for the next 5 minutes to 10 minutes before somebody shows up. I do active shooter training for 4 church campuses. And what I do is for each campus, when we do active shooter training, I said, your response time from the police for the first officer to get there, not all of them, for just one, is this amount of time. The least amount of time is 5 minutes. The max amount of time is 10 minutes.
Right.
So there's one group. Now I'm like, we're going to go through and you're going to shoot the active shooter. He's going to come in, shoot it up. You're going to shoot this guy. And now we're going to wait 10 minutes for just one cop to show up.
Yeah.
That's a long time to be treating wounded, to be controlling suspects, to clear the building. And then that's just one cop. And that cop, guess what? He's not going to do anything. He's going to be coordinating the response of everybody else.
Yeah. So you just tweaked me on something that happened during COVID. So we did the 10 days to slow the spread, and then DeSantis called BS on that, and we went back to business as usual here in Florida. So when that first happened, I was on my way to the office. I pulled into the 7-Eleven that I always got diesel at the time. So I'm in a 3/4 ton 4x4, 2,500 lifted, blah, blah, blah. And as per usual, I get the fuel start. I walk away from my truck, and I'm looking at it going, there's not a car in the parking lot. There's nobody in the parking lot. This is really, really spooky. Car pulls in, a few pumps down. I watch the guy get out. He goes around to the side to pump gas. Out of nowhere, this guy comes running from behind the 7-Eleven. And this is in small town USA where it's very rare to see homeless people. But this guy was clearly homeless. Tackles the guy who's getting ready to pump fuel and just starts wailing on him. So I'm grabbing my phone. I'm reaching for my pistol. And just by fluke, a sheriff's deputy pulled in. And he saw what was going on. He jammed that into park so fast. He must have come this close to breaking the parking pin because the whole car lurched. So he gets out, and now he's wailing on this homeless guy. And next thing you know, he's got him in handcuffs, and the guy's screaming, I haven't eaten in a week. I just want food. It was something surreal to happen in our type of community, but that's just another interesting gas station encounter that I've been on the periphery of. But just to reel things back in again, I got a couple things I want to hit on. Number one, I want to make some suggestions that if people are confronted or approached by somebody, what they can do. Then I want to get both of you to give us feedback on that. And then I want to wrap up this episode by discussing training options, both online and in person, and some really neat things that we learned at WOFT over the weekend. So just quick bullets. If you're at a gas station, you're approached by somebody, maintain eye contact. Don't look away from them, because as soon as you look away, there's a good chance you're going to get jumped. Number two, watch their hands and their waistline. That'll tell you what their intentions are for the most part. If they're reaching for a weapon, or if they're, loading up to unload on you. And then Keith will attest to this, and I think Jeff may have already mentioned it, but the rule of +1. Just because you only see one guy coming at you, there's probably another one. So you got to be able to look over your shoulders quickly to see if he has an accomplice. And here's something a lot of people miss out on, and I'll tell a couple stories on this when we get to the training part. But if you come out of the convenience store and you get confronted or you get blocked by somebody between the vehicle and you, go back inside. Choose safety. Like just retreat back into the store. It's probably the safest place that you could go. And the next one, just kind of common sense. When you get in your car, make it a habit. The very first thing you do is lock your car doors. The training we did on the weekend was pretty interesting. How people's adrenaline level was high, and they got in the car and they fumbled with the remote and they didn't get the doors locked, and the bad guy opened the door, and now the proverbial SH is hitting the TF. So, Keith, give me your critique of those bullets and any other suggestions you might have if somebody's confronted.
So the staring down issue, or the making eye contact. I just wrote an article over Christian Warrior Training. If you head over to ChristianWarriorTraining.com, you can download or you can look at the article where I talk about if somebody's staring at you and how to act to that. And a lot of it is, confirm the eye contact, give a head nod down, not up, because up is like, what do you want? Right? Yeah. Like, where are you from? That's like, seriously, that's where are you from? Right? It's down, right? Versus like down, like, hey, what's up? I know you. I see you. Right? And then a lot of people will realize, all right, it's situational awareness, right? So there's free. I put out that stuff for free. Okay. So go read that article. You talked about training. Training is paramount, especially like we know it's coming. Like everybody, even my most liberal friends are like, yeah, I know what's going to happen. Right. They know it. So it's not just going to the range, right? So obviously go to the range, go buy 1,000 rounds. It's about 200,000 rounds of 9mm going for $250 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Go buy 1,000 rounds and just start putting rounds down range in a reasonable manner. People will put up some good training drills for you to go through on your own to practice. And then you want to go do something like Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like something else, right? Because very rarely are you going to have a deadly force incident. More than likely, you're going to have to use Jiu-Jitsu. Honestly, I think Jiu-Jitsu or Krav Maga are the two things that you should do. Preferably a combo of both, but either one of those is what's going to save you in a violent confrontation for what we get ready for. And then you need to be working out to the best of your ability. Right. My back is screwed up. I have brain surgery. I have constant issues, but I'm still working out. I'm still doing what I can do so I can stay in physical shape, because at some point we all know the lights are going to shut off for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, hopefully not longer, but that's going to be a really, really bad time. And you better have your physical fitness squared away.
Before you go, Jeff, let me just put a little bit of context to your comments on exercising. So I'm going to bring up Tony BLAUER's human weapon system after Jeff goes. But Tony, in the 90s, his business got so busy, and it is until this day, that he found it really hard to find time. In other words, he couldn't go to the gym, train for a couple hours, shower, get changed, get back to work, and get all of his work done. So he came up with this concept of tactical snacks. So through the day, let's just call it an 8-hour day, it'd be top of the hour and say, okay, I'm going to do 10 push-ups, 12 push-ups, 15 push-ups, whatever the number is, and would do that every hour on the hour as he could as a tactical snack. And when it comes to exercise, it's the volume of output that, adds up. So if you think about it, let's just say easy numbers that the person did 8 times through the day, that's 80 a day. Let's say they only do it during work days. So now we're 400 for a 5-day work week. Now we're 1,600 for the month. I mean, you're getting into, 15, 16, 17,000 push-ups over the course of a year, or whatever exercise. That's a volume. That's a volume of work, and you are going to move the needle. So you don't have to go to the gym for 2 hours a day. You don't even need a gym membership, for crying out loud. You can do all sorts of body weight exercises. You can do them in small bite-sized snacks like Tony recommends. It's a good way. So I haven't been to the gym in 2 years, and I started training in 1982. In the past 2 years, all I do is I do run and gun shooting that's intermixed with all kinds of body weight exercises. I use bands, small dumbbells, get my heart rate elevated. And I still, frequently, somebody, how many days a week do you go to the gym? None. There's lots of options. You don't have to go to the gym and kill yourself. So Jeff, come back to you. As far as the comments were what people should do if they're faced with, a person confronting them at a gas station.
Yeah. if someone's confronting you, what I would do too, especially if I'm on foot, they're on foot. If you get on the ground, get the car between you and them. You don't want to go face to face with them because distance is your friend. And if you've got 2,000 pounds of steel between you and them, I'd rather talk at them across the hood of the car.
Good point.
Just to give yourself distance. And if they have a gun and they're going to shoot at you, I want them.
Yeah, this week may just be the last week of Streamlabs for us.
Out at Croaky.
Yeah, and I've got about this much patience left for Streamlabs.
Okay, but I was just saying I would try to get something between me and them. If it's a car, distance something to where I can't get stabbed from 50 feet away. But the other thing is when you get in your car, Keith said lock the doors. I would say lock the doors and get the hell out of there. If someone's going to steal your car, they're eyeing you because they want to carjack your car. They're probably going to wait for you to fill it up. Because if you're there, it's probably because you're empty and they don't want to carjack your car and run out of gas. If I'm going to steal a car, I want to steal a car with full gas tank. So I'm going to let the guy fill it up for me, and then I'll steal the car. So when you get done, get in the car, lock the door, get out of there. Don't go through your emails. Don't respond to texts, because then you're looking at your weapon of mass distraction, staring down, and somebody smashes your window, and you've got a gun in your face. Get out of there.
Yeah, Tony BLAUER's, frequently says these bad guys only want one of three things: body, person, possessions. That's it. And so their intentions are certainly not good. So on that note, I want to bring an option up for people. So we discuss training frequently. Sometimes we see comments from people, I can't afford to take that type of training. And that's a legitimate comment for sure. Another part to it is that you don't necessarily have to take in-person training. There are people like Tony BLAUER who've put together programs like this is called the Human Weapon System. So known as HWS for short. So the Tony's HWS course is 10 modules. Some of them are, shorter, 15, 20 minutes. Some of them are longer, an hour or two, that sort of thing. You can easily get through this training inside of a week, and it will definitely improve your odds of surviving an encounter with a bad person. So I will mention that if you take an interest in that, and Tony is very, very good at what he does, as you can see on this page here, and there'll be a link below. If you sign up for the Human Weapon System, it's train at your own pace online, and you use the code SD50, you get 50% off. It's $248 for world-class training. And yes, I'm giving Tony a shameless plug because he's the best of the best. He is recognized as the preeminent subject matter expert when it comes to sudden violence, and his training is literally second to none. So with that being said, we did some training at WOFT over the weekend. So it stands for Where Our Families Train. I'll bring that up quickly to show people. So the website's just WOFT.com. This is Philip Tapino. He's the guy who built this place. And everything that he does is predicated on scenarios. So I want to show you some of the scenarios that we went through, and then I'd like to get both of you to comment on them. I think I've got 3 videos queued up that were shot over the weekend. If you can't hear the audio, that's okay. We were behind plexiglass. So what you're going to see is a building where there's a car parked, and then around the perimeter of the inside of the building, there's all sorts of hidden walkways. So the scenario can constantly be changing. Philip made the comment that what we were seeing would never happen again. It was kind of like an ink blot. So in other words, what you said, Keith, the training that you did, it never unfolded that way. But the training that you did do increases your probability of making good decisions because your anxiety, stress, everything's been at a high level before. So let me bring up the first one here. And I believe this one is with an 18-year-old girl who had not seen anybody else go. And she did an amazing job, to be quite frank. So let me get this rolling. Okay, so that's the the hint to the people in the back that we're getting ready to start. The guy in the red is the cameraman, so he is not part of the exercise. And now this is to simulate this happening at night. So actually, no, this is not the girl that's coming up. So
You will be shot. Get away. Get away. Get away now. Get away from the car. Get away from the car. Away now. Get away now. Further. Move it.
okay, so Keith, I want to get your feedback on that. Just a couple quick things. I don't know if you guys could hear the audio or not, but there was quite a bit of instruction given by the victim to telling people, to back up, get away, using a flashlight to try and break their OODA loop. You probably heard some gunshots. That was these UTM rounds, which are a training tool that Keith has experience with. Critique what happened there, Keith.
So it kind of froze for me a little bit, so I missed a little bit. But from what I can see, he was doing a good job of controlling some of those other people and telling them to get back and using the flashlight. Don't underestimate the use of a flashlight. It works great, especially if you have strobe. I thought the strobe was a gimmick the first time I saw it.
Okay.
And then I used it on somebody accidentally at a crime I'd gone to. And I remember the guy was getting ready to assault us, but we didn't know that. When it hit him, he like looked and he went, oh, and he fell down. I'm like, oh my God, that worked. But that command voice, the command presence, get back further, keep ordering them, works good. But you want to have a less lethal option so that like when you tell them and they're not, spray them with pepper spray is the best, right? Hit them with some pepper spray. Are you going to get a little bit? Probably. So what? You're not going to get as bad as him. I've used pepper spray on crowds, works wonderful. You end out terrorizing everybody around you and it gets them away. And then the value of scenario training too. I do scenario training every month with my church security team, and I've seen their performance improve greatly as each month goes by. They're more assertive. They make better decisions. We have better outcomes as each month goes by.
So, wrong one. Let me pull this one up. So flashlights. So you had this experience, you used a strobe, and you essentially broke that person's OODA loop, right? So we do this thousands of times a day. We observe, we orient ourselves, we decide what we're going to do, and then we take action. And that's exactly what Philip was trying to drive home to everybody at this scenario-based training over the weekend. Is something as simple as shining a flashlight even on the ground can be enough to interrupt somebody's OODA loop, to give you the opportunity to get in your vehicle, retreat back to the store, those sort of things. So I just wanted to connect the dots there as far as the OODA loop and your comments on using a flashlight. Jeff, what were your thoughts of that scenario?
Well, I like the flashlight thing because, your first instinct, if you get shot in the face with a bright light, is either to close your eyes or at least look away. It's like when you drive down the road and you have that idiot who's coming with his high beams on, you tend to look to the side so you can still see where you're going. Well, if you hit them with a flashlight, they're going to instinctively probably do the same thing. And even if they decide to rush you, they're not looking at you as they rush you, which gives you the opportunity to step to one side or the other, to use the flashlight as a weapon. something along those lines, because it disrupts what they're doing. Because no one likes getting hit in the face with a bright light.
So
So,
a good example is I can point my gun at you and tell you stop moving, or I can fleck on my light and say stop moving.
Yeah.
Right.
Good point.
I have a light on I don't have one pistol that doesn't have a light, and it's always much better to go ahead and you can momentary, whatever you need to, but it's better. That disorientation is phenomenal, but you should have a light on your gun all the way around.
Totally agree with that. So I've got a selection of flashlights beside me, and I didn't put a lot of time and effort into it on purpose because I wanted to just kind of have some different flashlights to show. So this is a flashlight from Woobin. It's magnetic. It's got, a side light. It's got a front light. It's insanely bright, but I would never use this for the purposes that we're describing here for one specific reason. I constantly have to hunt for what switch turns on which light, and there's no way to orientate it as far as making that easy. So as bright as this is and as nice of a flashlight, for these types of circumstances, you're going from your car into the gas station or the convenience store and back, something that you can turn on and off really quickly with your thumb, as opposed to something like this where you're fumbling for a connection. Here's a really cool flashlight that we were sent by somebody. It's, insanely powerful, but this is not something at this size that I'm going to carry in my pocket. They advertise it as such, but I'm not carrying my pocket, and I can't easily, orientate it because there's two tubes. It's just another example. And believe it or not, here's its big brother, and it's called an EDC flashlight. There's no way I'm carrying this as an EDC flashlight. Number one. Number two, there's no buttons on the back. So now I'm fumbling around trying to find which button is it on the side. So choosing the right flashlight matters a lot. This one is so powerful, it will blind you, but it weighs a ton, and it's so powerful, it actually has built-in fans. So I kid you not, you can see there's ports in it where the fan runs inside.
Wow.
Really cool flashlight. Great for seeing what's going on in your property. Great for looking at, you're fixing your car, side of the road, whatever the case may be. You may have heard in that last video something that sounded like electrocution. So one of the training aids that was used over the weekend was from a company called Guard Dog, and it was essentially a knife that's electrified. And the same company make this flashlight, which is, I think, $29 on Amazon. And this is a real flashlight, comes with a holster. So, you can have strobe, and each time you flick it on and off, it goes into a different mode, different strength and whatnot. Looks like a regular flashlight, but you can light somebody up with this sucker. So it's a little bigger, but this is a great weapon. The end, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be hit with an end that looks like that. No. Somebody hitting me in the face with it, sort of thing. With all of that being said, you know what? Here's two crappy flashlights that cost next to nothing, that operate with your thumb on it. There's no hold it for 3 seconds, jump upside down, rub your belly, and pat your head at the same time to get it to change modes. I would rather have either one of these than one of those big fancy flashlights. So the idea is you get out of your car, you have a flashlight in your hand. If you're encountered by somebody, you either, shine it in their eyes, shine it on the ground, whatever the case may be, to break their OODA loop. If necessary, you can use it as a weapon. But I will add one thing that wasn't covered over the weekend, is that there's all kinds of studies that show if somebody attacks you, whatever's in your hands, you're going to clamp down on it. So, for example, when you're in public, if you're right-handed and you have a bag of goods that you've purchased and you get attacked, say you're walking out the front door of the gas station and somebody comes at you sideways, you'll end up clamping down on whatever that is in your hand. So I've had this rule of thumb for years to always use my offhand if I'm carrying something. If I'm carrying a bag, it's in my offhand. If I'm going to use a flashlight like this, I'm going to use my offhand. And the reason I'm going to use my offhand is so that my dominant hand can grab a pistol if needed without me clamping down on a flashlight, trying to get rid of the flashlight, trying to get my gun. It's too many steps, too much time, expended over that, trying to defend yourself. So let me pull up another video here and see what happens. So this is just the setup at the beginning. And again, we're up in the mezzanine, but down below, there's all kinds of secret passageways around here so that people who are engaged in the scenario can be hidden, those sort of things. So we've transitioned. It's now nighttime. Here comes the girl out of the front of the convenience store. There's a man to the right of the screen that's blocking her from going around the front of the truck. Now she's got two people mulling around outside. And now that person's trying to block her from getting into her vehicle on the driver's side. Good use of the flashlight. You'll notice the actor on the left turned away. So she chooses safety. She can't get back in the store, but she gets in the car, thinks she had it locked, and it wasn't locked. And the bad guy was able to open the door and take control of that situation. So point being is this girl had never done this type of training before. That was probably her 5th or 6th rep. She had it in her mind that when I get in the car, I've got to lock the door, but she fumbled with it. So we like to think that we can all react, lickety split, when in reality, it's really easy to make a mistake like that. Keith, seeing that one, what critiques can you offer on that?
So you're always going to make a mistake every day, no matter what. And you're not going to be perfect every time. So you got to be prepared for when you're not. I mean, you're going to screw up somewhere. She did a wonderful job using that flashlight, and in waving it and shining it at him, right, and giving him commands. Hey, get away from me. She made a great decision to go into the passenger side, because in my mind, I'm like, go to the passenger side, girl, go get in there, right, jump in. Forgetting to lock the door. Look, that's a mistake, but you are going to make a mistake, so you got to be prepared to come around. You have got to have some less lethal option. She doesn't have deadly force, right?
Correct.
But you can certainly, and a lot of people are like, oh, he's getting in there. I tell you what, man, if that happened, if you shoot that person and you are in Alameda County, LA County, San Francisco County, New York City, like anything like that, Baltimore, you're going to get prosecuted. Okay. So grabbing like having pepper spray in your vehicle to where you'd be like, haha, joke's on you, and then spray them and then kick them, right? And kick them so they fall back down, close the door, and then take off. And you're good to go, right? And it goes back to like, you got to have multiple options. Not everything is deadly force. If all you have is a handgun, your only option is deadly force, and that's not good. You're more than likely going to use some lesser means of force.
Well, what the old adage, if all you have is a hammer in your hand, everything appears to be a nail.
Yep.
Jeff?
Well, I like with the light, what she was doing too. She'd shine it in their face and then pull it away, in their face, pull it away. Because if you're at night, okay, their eyes are set, their pupils are dilated. You hit them with that light, it's disorienting, because their eyes are being overwhelmed with light. You take it off, they start to dilate again. You hit them again, and it keeps them off balance as well, unless they're going to just charge you. But yeah, I think by doing it multiple times, it's almost kind of like a very slow strobe, that it doesn't give their eyes enough time to adjust to either all light or all darkness, and so that it makes it hard to focus on stuff.
So the guys at WOFT also made a comment that if the intended victim or target has this tool in their hand, it raises the thought amongst the attackers that what other tools does this person have?
Yeah.
Yep.
Do they have a gun? Do they have a knife? Like, what else do they have? So it's unbelievable what you can do as far as interrupting people's OODA loop, disorienting them, and even worst comes to worst, having to use it as a weapon. pretty awesome training at WOFT. And by the way, we do have a link for WOFT down below. Survival 10, I believe, is the code. It'll be down there. You get 10% off. So let's have a look at the last one. There were, I mean, holy cow. Probably we went through a couple hundred of these on Saturday, all totaled from first thing in the morning till at night. But this is the third and final one that we're going to go through before we wrap up today's episode. So here we go. Oh, and that was at the very end. So sorry, my apologies. So Philip's just giving people the lay of the land here before we start. So here we go. So this is daytime. We're not transitioning to night. I believe this was her very first one, and she's 18 years old, by the way. So even during the daytime, the recommendation is still use a flashlight to interrupt somebody's OODA loop. Now she can't get around the side of her vehicle. So she's telling them to back up, go away, being assertive. And the doors are locked. So, you know, kind of what seems like a really simple situation, but at the end of the day, for an 18-year-old girl who'd never seen anybody else do these scenarios, I think she made pretty good decisions. Keith, what do you have to add to that?
She did a wonderful job in imposing her will. The suspects were trying, and I learned this in the Army back when we talked about like force on force, like you're ambushed. They're imposing their will upon you. Now you need to impose your will upon them to get them to back up. And I've used that as a cop constantly telling my trainees, impose your will. Impose your will. Like, why are you letting this guy run the show? Impose your will. And it originally started as like people were joking around when they'd see me, impose your will. But all of a sudden you saw the whole change amongst everybody where it's like, hey, impose your will, get up there, you know, and like you become like, stop reacting, you know, make them react to you. And she's making them react. Right. 2 points. If she had less lethal, that pepper spray, I can't, people talk smack about pepper spray, but they've never used it. I pepper sprayed so many people. I love it. Right. It is I mean, like think about it, right? If I have, like, a lot of people want to carry an expandable baton. If you hit somebody with an expandable baton, it's assault with a deadly weapon. Okay. It's a felony. It's like assaulting somebody with a gun. If I pepper spray you and that rogue DA decides to try and charge me, I just use pepper spray. Everybody's like, oh, it's just pepper spray, man up. Right. Like it's a lesser charge, but it's more effective than striking. It's like you hit somebody with a baton a lot. I mean, I've hit people with a baton and they've gone like, ow. And then they like, you know, get ready to come again. It's like, ah, shit, that didn't work. Right. And then you're like struggling to come up with something new. But pepper spray, the same thing happens every time. Right. Unless they're totally drugged out and don't understand what's going on. But like you hit them with the pepper spray and you try to aim for the brow. You just do one quick swipe across the face and they all do this. They go, oh. And they have that momentary, like, you did something and I think it's going to be bad, but I'm not sure yet. And they're like, but it makes them pause and they go like, oh, and then they go, oh, and it gets progressively worse and worse and worse and worse. And like, and then pretty soon it's like, can't see me. Can't fight me if you can't see me. And then you go back and you either pummel them, right? Or whatever. But if you have a rogue DA, we'll go back to like running somebody over, right? It was an accident versus it was intentional, right? You can either hit somebody with a baton or you can pepper spray them, right? And then you're a girl and you pepper spray these two big men. No jury's going to convict you, you know? Yeah. And so she was able to, she did a great job, not dissing anything. I'm just some points, right? But I don't think they gave her those options to even use. But if you have that pepper spray on you and you're like, hey, get back, and you start coming up and he starts approaching you, I've given him his warning. I'm imposing my will. And you can even do, like, one of the things I like doing is I just like throwing my foot forward and just going, get back. And then, like, it's funny. I had this one tiny female officer and I'm like, impose your will. And she just goes, get back, like that. And this big gang member just goes, whoa. Like, like throws his hand up. I laugh because it was so funny, but it works, right? The other thing that works really well is like, I always call it the rape whistle. The cops have the traffic whistle, like to give direction when you're directing traffic. And I always tell cops like, hey, grab your rape whistle and come on out here, right? But it works. I remember being at a fight where everybody was pummeling each other at a bar, and I had a trainee and I'm like, watch the power of the whistle. And he looks at me like, what? And I blow it. The entire bar stops. And they all look at me and I'm like, get on the ground. And they did, right? It's because we're preconditioned as kids to hear the whistle and stop, right?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
like you're on the yard, blow the whistle, everybody stops, right? It's hilarious. And no cops really use it anymore. Like nobody really uses their whistle anymore. And like, I didn't use it a lot, but when I did, it was like to make fun of people because like, it was just funny to use it and to watch everybody stop. And it's like, made you stop. Right.
And again, if there was any doubt in anybody's mind, this is the real Keith Graves who's kind of accurate.
Well, I'm telling you, man, you throw that whistle and you blow it, everybody looks, and those guys don't want attention. And so she just blows really hard, man. They're gonna be like, crap. You've now imposed your will upon them, and now they're gonna back up. Right.
Well, and you're back to interrupting their OODA loop.
Yep.
So now they've got to reset everything. Jeff, what were your thoughts on that last video?
Well, on the whistle thing, the other thing is it draws attention. You hear this loud whistle, it's like a scream. Everybody's going to turn towards it. And if you're a bad guy, the last thing you want is a shitload of witnesses.
Yeah.
But what she did that I liked is she kept her distance and a lot of times kept the car between her and the closest guy. He can't just reach out and grab her. He's got to go around. He's got to fight his way around a car. And she kept maneuvering, and as he would move back, she would move, and he never got close enough to just grab her. Not without rushing.
For being 18 years old, having never done anything like this, and not even seeing anybody else do it. She was the first victim of the day. So she didn't have the benefit of watching what other people had gone through. I think she did a great job. Like I say, she went through at least probably 15 reps, and each one was slightly different. And again, like Philip Tapino described it, he said, we'll never see this training ever again. This is like an ink blot. This is a one-time deal. So he was trying to drive home Keith's point. It's not going to unfold exactly like this ever again. But if you've been through this and you're under stress and you're practicing techniques, flashlight, and you have an idea where to go, it becomes second nature. It's like playing football. I've used this analogy over and over and over again. If you're an outside linebacker, you've seen the same play 1,000 times before. You don't have to stop and think to get to the play. But the guy who does have to stop and thinks a half a step behind, football's a game of speed. You might as well not even be on the field at that point in time. So,
hey, Chris, good. You brought up the point about not affording to be able to train. I belong to a group here in Idaho. It is a team of about 10 people, and everybody on that team, we have 2 doctors, we have a trauma surgeon, we have an ER doctor, and then we have a couple of SWAT guys, and like everybody has a skill, and we meet once a month, and that once a month it's somebody's turn to train, and then we train based on that skill. I learned how to do sutures. I'm dying to learn how to do that forever. I learned how to do them, when to do them, right? And then I'm teaching these people how to make entries with multiple people, like basically hostage rescue. And we're doing like, hey, the cops can't come. They're not coming because you can't, the phones are down. They've been down for 2 weeks and you're on your own. We all team up. And now because somebody is trapped somewhere and we need to go get them, this is how we're going to go make our entry. And how to have your kit set up and all that kind of stuff. Right.
Which, that's
and it's all free. It's free. It doesn't cost. And there's some people that are super rich that have multiple homes, the doctors. And then there's other people that, don't have hardly a dime to their name. No problem, man. I got you covered. Like when you show up, this is the equipment I'm going to give you.
That's
and
awesome.
We're going to all work as a team. So like, just find your group. You just have to you personally have to have some value that you bring to that group. Right.
Yes.
And it could be you're a carpenter. Yeah, man, I could build us the best bunker that ever was seen on this earth, right? It just have
100%.
have a skill that transfers to something.
Yeah, no, very well said. Before we do the conflicted question, I don't recall if I've spoken to you other than last night since we got back from filming for Surviving Man 3, but the guys from Genesis Arms were there. So these are the baddest full auto shotguns in the world. They never jam. They've got a proprietary mag instead of those garbage Sega mags that every other shotgun has for semi-autos and autos. And it's based on an AR-17 platform, just like a 50 BMG. So it has a minimal recoil barrel. So when you shoot, the barrel travels 200 thousandths of an inch, hits a stop, slams back, and that inertia loads the next round. They have a cyclic rate of 800 rounds per minute out of a shotgun. And
That's
obviously, obviously you're not doing that. You'd melt the barrel, but that's how fast they are. Okay. I've got videos of myself and Mike Glover unloading these things, but they're the ones who did the shotguns for John Wick. So they actually had the John Wick shotgun there. They had their existing breaching shotgun, which made me think of you. And then they let me shoot their brand new breaching shotgun, which is going to be released next month. So it's a shotgun with a 5-inch barrel, then a titanium can on the end of it. And it's not ear safe. Like it only brings it down full slugs to something like 140 decibels. But you can put a 10-round stick or a 15-round mag underneath it. And they had a video that's not published, but that they showed me on their phones, where instead of breaching by taking top hinge, middle hinge, bottom hinge, you just take this little shotgun and you point it at the top middle of the door and go, and you unzip the door and walk straight through the middle. And when he showed me the video, I thought Keith Graves would go crazy for one of these.
That's awesome.
Like, yeah, it's an incredible piece of equipment. And
Screw the people on the other side of the door.
Oh yeah, history. All right, so let's wrap up here with our conflicted question of the day. Weeks after the collapse of society, one man in your survivalist group accused another of murder. The accused denies everything. The scene where the murder supposedly took place is far away. You couldn't really verify the facts without risking someone's life. It comes down to one man's word against another. If it were up to you to decide if the man is guilty or innocent, what questions would you ask and how would you make up your mind? Jeff, go to you first.
Yeah, it's tough because you can't really investigate the crime scene at all. But I go back to the old line: if you tell the truth, you don't have to have a good memory. So I would interview both of them, ask them a series of questions, write down the answers, wait 2 days, and then ask them the same questions in a different order and see if I get the same answers. The one who's telling the truth will probably give you the same answers because he doesn't have to think about it. The one who's lying has to remember what he told you 2 days ago.
And this is why we brought in a CIA operative, because of that messing with your mind, the whole thing right there, right? Well done, Jeff. Keith?
This is an everyday event, man. People there, you always have one person. You got two truths. Which one is the truth? Which one is the real truth, right? Look, the biggest thing, first thing you do is you split up the parties and don't ever interview them together. Go to the complainant and say, all right, what happened? And they'll tell you what happened. Give me every detail. And then if they are untruthful, you'll see them try to come up with details that they didn't think you were going to ask about, right? Like, what hand was the gun in? And then like, it was his right hand. And then it turns out he's left-handed, right? You know what I mean? Like, you can see them where they're like, there's a difference between coming up with, let me think about what it was, versus like he's coming up with something to make up, to fill the void, right? Once you get that information, you go back to the other person and you go talk to them and say, hey, this is what they said happened. What really happened? And then it's the same thing. And you listen to what both people have to say. And you know what? When you talk to both of them, it's very easy to see who is untruthful. I mean, it comes out really fast, especially, I guess it's a little easier for me because I had every day I had to do this.
Yeah.
And you had to listen to two stories. You're like, that guy's full of shit. And you go to this other guy and you're like, yep, that guy's a liar. And you go back. And what I do is I go back and I'm like, hey man, I'm going to give you a chance to revise your story. So come up and give me a revision of your story so that you're not the one this is your one and only time. Like if you believe the complainant is not telling the truth, this is your one and only time that you can tell me the truth. And if they come back and tell you the exact same thing again, other times some people are like, well, hang on. And like, they'll try to like do a negotiation. It's hilarious because they expect I'm going to say this and people are going to believe me. And then when you start putting pressure on them, and it's a little bit different when you're a police officer and you're standing there in uniform and you're leaning on people like, all right, is this the same story you want to go with? Is this what you want me to put pen to paper to? Is this what you want? Be very careful about what you say because I'm giving you an out right now. This is your one and only off ramp. If you take this off ramp, no harm, no foul. We go about business as usual. But if you make me put pen to paper on this, you're sticking to that. You're going to deal with the consequences if it's not truthful. Right? And people end out caving at that point, or they stick to their story and then you hammer them with the truth. Right? But you're going to have to, what you need to do, split them up, question them individually, get very detailed on that complainant. Make them break down every freaking detail. Make them write it on paper, right? Make them write it on paper and explain it.
So I'm nowhere near as sophisticated as you guys. So honestly, the first thought that crossed my mind is I would defer to somebody else in my group who had experience like you guys did, because I don't have a whole bunch of experience there. The closest analogy that I can draw is that I developed a very specific recruiting, hiring, and onboarding process for employees. My belief is that you have to be extremely diligent when you're hiring somebody because their life and their family's life now depends on you. So you have an obligation not to bring somebody in without doing your due diligence and then saying, it's not a good fit and sending them down the road and they've lost their income, they've lost their health insurance, and it's just not a good position to put somebody in. So you should be very careful with that. So during that whole recruit, hire, onboard process, one of the things that I baked in was after the phone interview and after the first in-person interview, the third and fourth interview were done in a group setting. And I would have somebody, asking the applicant questions while I observed how they reacted to those questions. A lot of them would be questions, things related to their work history, points in the past in their life. So again, not very sophisticated, but it was something I was taught many, many years ago, that if you're asking somebody questions like that and they look up and to the right, that's the creative side of the brain. They're making a story up. They're fabricating something most likely. If they look up and to the left, that's the data center. That's the database where all the true information is stored, and they're probably extracting information. I'm not going to say that it's empirical, but there have been some very specific instances over the years where I was at the table, somebody else was asking questions, I was observing the person, and they constantly went up and to the right. And sure enough, before that third or fourth interview was done, they said something that was very contradictory to what they said earlier, which is to your point. So
you're a good point. You kind of brought up a little bit, and I forgot I even did this, and I can't believe I forgot. But one of the things I like to ask is, what are you looking for out of this? So you've brought this up and you've brought it to our attention. What's your end goal? What do you want from this? Right. And that what their answer is telling a lot of times, because sometimes it becomes petty. I want him to go to jail. He did this, he did that. And then they tell you all this stuff. And it's like, oh, that's your motivation right there. Right. Like, so example, you say this,
okay.
What do you want from this? I just want to make sure he does not kill any of our people. I'm afraid that while our backs are turned, he's going to shoot us and take our stuff too. Right. Then it's like, well, I understand that. Or we need to kill him immediately and execute him and take his stuff and divide it amongst our group. It's like, wow, where'd that come from? Right. You know what I mean? Like, and it goes like, I was taught that in training by a experienced cop, and I've used that in everything. Like, what are you looking for out of this? And I used it as a supervisor when people complained about cops. Hey, what are you looking for about this? Oh, I just want to make sure in case he's doing something and you have some backup or something. It's like, that's a legitimate person. Or he wrote me that ticket and he swore at me and he needs to be fired. It's like, yeah, he ain't gonna get fired. You deserve that ticket. Right.
Right.
So it's, it like you learn a lot, like you brought it up, and that was a great point. You get to find out their motivations when you ask, like, what are you looking for out of this?
Yeah. And I mean, and that's why this series of cards that are in this game are called conflicted, because it will show if there's a conflict, right, in somebody's thought processes. Just like the owners of this game, when they invited their new neighbors over, the new neighbor said, "We don't prep. We're just going to take whatever we want at gunpoint if it hits the fan." Well,
I think it's worth. I've heard that come up from another. There's a podcast. I won't mention the podcaster because I think he meant it in jest, but it's a national security person that has a national daily brief podcast, and he made the comment, "Oh, I just have a gun full or a safe full of guns, and I'm just going to take what you have." Right. And when he said that, I was like, "My God, no!" Like number one, and this person I think is a Christian too, which is just that bothered me a lot. But
yeah,
I don't think what people realize is, look, when the lights come back on, even if it's a year later, there's going to be a reckoning.
Yes.
Look after the Balkans. There was a reckoning after the Balkans. Look after World War II in France with the people that colluded with the enemy. There was a reckoning. There is always a reckoning. If you go out and do crazy stuff like the neighbors of the people that created this game, when the lights come back on, there's going to be a reckoning, and you have to pay for what you've done. Yeah. And not just that, but when you get judged when you pass, right?
100%. Jeff, you want to add anything before we wrap up?
No, I think that you guys covered it pretty well. I mean, I think with these two guys, you just got to look at what the motivation is. And from a spying standpoint, I mean, I'm trying to recruit some of the spy for the country. We always wanted to know what the motivation was, not their stated motivation.
Gotcha.
Actual motivation. And it might have been, my boss screwed me over. Yeah, I'm not appreciated at work. I do all the real work here, but he gets the promotions, and I'm going to spy so I can get even with him. As a case officer, I don't care why he's spying, as long as he's spying.
So in other words, we're back to Jeff's mental CIA jujitsu.
My job was to recruit spies. It was to get the intel. I hear you. If you do it, you did it.
Fair enough. All right, guys, listen, I appreciate your time. It was a very informative episode. For those of you who watched all the way to the end, thank you for following Survival Dispatch. Be safe.